Is it Afrophobia, xenophobia, or just plain good old-fashioned criminality? Recently, Nigerian ministers met with President Jacob Zuma following a meeting with some of his cabinet members to discuss strong relations between South Africa and Nigeria, and also to create some kind of an early warning system to deal with problems that Nigerians have particularly experienced in South Africa and vice versa. This is The Moneymakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield. Tonight we'll look at this Afrophobia, criminality, xenophobia, whatever it is that from time to time, when times get particularly tough in South Africa, tend to erupt. The third time since 2008. Its impact on South African companies beginning to be felt in other parts of the continent, with MTN's headquarters in Abuja being under siege for a little while. The political economist and author Moeletsi Mbeki is in studio with me this evening. It is extraordinary how this scourge of xenophobia, is it Afrophobia, is it criminality, whatever it might be, I'd be interested in your classification of it, does rear its head from time to time. We've just been through the most recent round of it.
Well, as you know, we have lots and lots, thousands actually in every year, of demonstrations in poor neighborhoods in South Africa. So when it involves foreigners, people pay a bit more attention. But these demonstrations happen sometimes daily, in fact, almost daily. When you listen to a traffic report in the morning, inevitably there is a demonstration going on somewhere in the country.
It's the only way people believe that they get heard, is to burn a tire, block a road. At least that way somebody pays attention. A little bit like, anybody who doesn't get attention, they start making a fuss. And we're seeing this happen on a daily basis. But it's got an ugly undertone, and that is the undertone of targeting anybody to blame. And if we can't blame the state, if the state is armed with big guns, we take it out on our neighbours. And our neighbours, in many cases, may very well be foreign Africans.
Well, we take it out on lots of people. I mean, the poor people take it out on lots of people. So I'm very reluctant myself with the labels that get thrown around as to what is this that is happening. The reality, as I say, is there are thousands every year of demonstrations. The main casualties, ironically, are the police. They are the people who are exposed to the violence by the poor South Africans who are unhappy with their condition.
It's the thin blue line between chaos and order. It's the thin blue line that is the police, who are expected somehow to contain what is a social crisis.
It is a major crisis.
Is it social or is it political? Because in many cases...
It's not just a South African crisis. You see, people are looking at one side of the equation. Why do we have so many people from all over the world living in poor neighborhoods in South Africa, especially in the Gauteng region of South Africa? To me, that's the first question I have to ask myself. I read somewhere that there are 200,000 Nigerians in South Africa. Why do we have 200,000 Nigerians in South Africa? We certainly don't have 200,000 South Africans in Nigeria. So to me, that's the first question. Why do Somalis or Ethiopians walk all the way from the Horn of Africa to South Africa? Why are the Bangladeshi and the Pakistanis in the poor neighborhoods of South Africa? These are the questions that one has to start to address.
Anecdotally, one would assume it's because they would see economic opportunities as being better for themselves, prospects for their families being better here than at home. I mean, South Africa has always been a melting pot of people seeking opportunity. Gauteng, the very name, suggests this is the land, the city, the region of opportunity. It is where people have congregated since 1886, when George Harrison found some gold-bearing rock on the Witwatersrand. It's the promise, and that promise is not fulfilled. And that promise is certainly not being fulfilled for people who believe that they belong here at the expense of others. Isn't that a problem?
Well, it's not a problem, it's a reality. The reality is that South Africa has a mass of poor people. According to statistics I got recently from the Auditor General, half of the working age population of South Africa does not work. Yeah. So, and it is migrating to the big cities. And then on top of that, you are having other people from all over the world migrating to South African cities. So these conflicts are built into that equation.
But migration is a global phenomenon. It's been a phenomenon since the days of Marco Polo. It's been a phenomenon either through conquest or through economic migration throughout the ages. The United States is a country of immigrants. You go into London, for example, and no two people look the same. Migration in search of economic prosperity is a reality. It's a global phenomenon, right?
But so has genocide against indigenous peoples. Where are the Native Americans today in the United States? Many of them were slaughtered in the 18th, 19th, and 17th century. So those are the conflicts that are built into migration.
We remain a magnet for people looking for hope. How do we deal with an influx of people who come looking for hope and in many cases have got the skills, the wherewithal, the courage to start their own businesses, to stand out in communities that feel dispossessed, and suddenly, hold on a second, but these guys from Somalia are making a living where I can't. That's not fair, that's not right, and I turn my attention on the invaders, as I might see them, and take my frustration out on them.
Yes, the question of leadership is very, very important in that issue. What is our own government doing to overcome unemployment, to address the issues of the poor in South Africa? Those are the primary challenges for South Africa. Now, can we solve Nigeria's poverty problems? Can we solve the DRC's poverty problems? Can we solve Zimbabwe's poverty problem? Of course not. We can't solve their problems. So you are faced with a second question then is, what do we do with the instability on the African continent that is leading to instability in South Africa? What should we do about it?
What should we do?
Well, we have to do something. We can't just sit on our hands.
Once Donald Trump's finished building his wall, do we get those guys to come and build a wall across our borders? That's not feasible, sustainable, or anything like that. Somehow we need to get this continent working for more of its people.
We have to get Africa to work properly. We can't afford a situation where Robert Mugabe and ZANU-PF destroy their own economy and then expect South Africa to receive all the people who were displaced from destroying their own economy. So these are big political and diplomatic issues which the South African government is faced with. It thinks it can pass on that problem to the poor in South Africa. That is where your problem comes in, is that the government, instead of tackling Mugabe destroying his country's economy to make sure it doesn't happen, it says, well, we will sit on our hands, do nothing about that. Anyway, the problem will be passed on to the poor in South Africa. So the poor in South Africa are paying the price of the inability of our government to make sure Africa works.
I saw one of the proposed solutions by Moeletsi Mbeki, the Home Affairs Minister, the other day, was to say, well, now we need to regulate the number of foreigners who can be working in South African restaurants, because whenever he goes to a restaurant, he's served by a Zimbabwean waiter, for argument's sake. And many people are losing those jobs. My first job, I don't know what your first job was, but you worked in your mum's spaza shop many years ago at Transkei, but my first job was as a spur waiter. And for many people, that was their introduction into the work environment. Nowadays, the demographics of the spur waiter have changed quite considerably. We can't legislate our way, though, we can't regularize this problem.
I think it's disappointing that the Home Affairs Minister really, all he does is listen to gossip in the northern suburbs and comes to the conclusion that all waiters in South Africa are foreigners or are from Zimbabwe. I would expect something better than that from a minister of the South African government.
Look, I mean, we would expect many better things from many ministers in South African government, and maybe that's a discussion for another day, and maybe I'll get you back to talk precisely about that point. But we sit with a problem where foreign nationals or people who are not South African, other Africans, are feeling increasingly vulnerable in our country. We see the consequences of that playing out with an isolated incident in Abuja, just the frustration or the response against a South African company of MTN in Abuja. I mean, should we be concerned of the knock-on ramifications across this continent?
Well, of course, attacks on South African property or property of South Africans in other countries is something to be concerned about, and it's the responsibility of those governments to protect South African properties in their own countries.
As we should be protecting foreign people living in South Africa.
Absolutely. But the issue is that what I'm saying is that we have to address the fundamentals of the problem, which is the failing economies in many African countries like Nigeria, which is what is now, they are exporting their problems to South Africa, they are exporting their problems to the United States, to other countries, to England, and so on. Now, that is where the problem should be tackled at the source.
But where should it be tackled? I mean,
it has to be tackled in Nigeria.
The purpose of the African Union was to try and encourage countries to work together, to cooperate on matters of mutual interest.
Actually, it's a good point that you are making here. We saw a potential meltdown coming in Gambia a couple of months ago. The countries in West Africa intervened, sent in their armies. Why? Because they didn't want the Gambians to become migrants in the neighboring countries and fuel instability in the neighborhoods.
We've proven it can work.
It can be done. Now, the point is we are seeing regimes like the ZANU-PF regime creating the mayhem that the Gambian regime was trying to create to stay in power. But what do? We fold our hands and we have all sorts of sophisticated formulae explaining away what is the white farmer is responsible for Mugabe losing power to the opposition MDC, all those kinds of nonsensical explanations, and then we sit around and do nothing. The West Africans showed you have to do something, and they did it. Why are we not doing something in South Africa? South Africa and Botswana are the hosts of huge number of migrants. Well, we have to, both South Africa and Botswana have to tackle the problem and Zambia and do something about it.
Moeletsi Mbeki, nice to see you. Thank you very much for coming in. I think what we need to do is get Moeletsi Mbeki in, the political economist and author, to talk about the state of the nation. We'll do that in a couple of days' time. Moeletsi Mbeki, of course, is a foremost thinker on the political economy. There'll be more Pan-African issues, but also we will look at more detail as to what's going down in South Africa, because it's not just the rest of the African continent that finds itself under extraordinary pressure. In South Africa, we're sitting on a time bomb of discontent. I'm reminded of a column that Moeletsi Mbeki wrote years ago, warning of a social grants crisis. I wonder if it's playing out the way he thought it would. We'll talk to him about that another day. Till next time, bye-bye.